You really think you can hold on to land this big by yourself? This place is wasted on someone who probably can't even read the deed.
Dutch kicked the gate open, letting it crack against the post. Dora crossed her arms, eyes steady, and let the threat sit in the silence between them.
Keep that quiet little act up. It won't save you when we come back later.
I think it's best if you leave now, sir.
Or what?
Dutch Blaine had no idea the woman he was threatening spent 20 years in Delta Force, trained to end men like him in seconds, and his clock was already running out. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. The sun was barely up when Dora Whitelaw heard the engines. She stood on her porch with a cup of coffee going cold in her hand, watching 3 black trucks roll up her gravel drive. Dust kicked up behind them like smoke. The fence posts cast long shadows across the grass, and somewhere behind the barn, a rooster crowed like it knew trouble was coming too. Dora didn't move. She just watched. The trucks stopped in a row, blocking the path to her own front gate. Doors opened. 3 men climbed out, boots hitting gravel hard, like they wanted her to hear every step. The man in front wore a clean black jacket, too clean for a ranch. His head was shaved smooth, and a smile sat on his face that didn't match his eyes. "Morning," he said, like they were old friends. "Name's Ridge Hereford. You must be the famous Mrs. Whitelaw." Dora set her coffee down on the porch rail. "I don't know what's famous about a woman minding her own land." Hereford laughed, short and sharp. Behind him, a thick man with a shaved head and tattoos crawling up his neck cracked his knuckles. A third man hung back near the trucks, arms crossed, watching the house like he was counting windows. Melody stepped out of the barn doorway, a feed bucket still in her hand. She froze when she saw the trucks. "We're here to talk business," Hereford said. He walked closer, slow, like he had all the time in the world. "Your land sits right where some important folks need it to sit. Water rights, frontage acres. We're prepared to make you a very generous offer." "Generous." Dora repeated the word like it tasted wrong. "Funny word for whatever you're about to say." Hereford's smile didn't move. He pulled a folded paper from his jacket and held it out like a gift. $40,000. Cash. For land worth 4 times that. I'd call that generous, considering. Considering what? Considering accidents happen out here all the time. His voice stayed light, almost friendly, but the words landed heavy. Barns catch fire. Cattle get loose on the highway. Bad things happen to folks who don't know when to take a good deal. Dora's jaw tightened. She'd heard threats before. Real ones. Men with guns and worse intentions had said scarier things to her face and meant every word. This man, with his clean jacket and his crooked smile, didn't scare her one bit. "This land's been in my husband's family for 3 generations, she said, voice steady as stone. "It's not for sale, not for 40,000, not for 400,000. Hereford's smile finally cracked. Something colder slid into his eyes. "You don't understand how this works, sweetheart. I understand plenty. This isn't a negotiation." He stepped closer, close enough that Dora could smell his cologne, sharp and expensive. "It's a courtesy. The next time we come back, we won't be asking nice." Dutch Blaine, the thick man with the tattoos, took a step forward too, his eyes locked on Melody like she was something he could break just by looking at her hard enough. Melody's grip tightened on the bucket handle, knuckles going pale. Dora didn't flinch. She kept her eyes on Hereford, calm and unreadable, the same look she used to give men in places most people would never want to know existed. "You should go," she said quietly. For a moment, nobody moved. The wind picked up, rattling the porch chimes behind her. Somewhere far off, a horse whinnied in the pasture. Hereford studied her face like he was trying to find a crack in it. He didn't find one. "Suit yourself," he finally said, tucking the paper back into his jacket. "Clock's already ticking, Mrs. Whitelaw." He turned and walked back to his truck, motioning for his men to follow. The third enforcer climbed in without a word. But Dutch lingered a moment longer, his eyes crawling over Melody one last time before sliding to Dora, something ugly and amused sitting behind them. Then he turned, spit into the dirt, and climbed in after the others. The trucks pulled away, slow, gravel crunching under their tires, leaving a trail of dust hanging in the morning light. Dora didn't move until the sound of the engines faded completely. Melody still hadn't moved from the barn doorway when the trucks reached the end of the drive. "You okay?" Dora called out, stepping down off the porch. Melody set the feed bucket down, hands shaking just a little. Yeah, I'm fine. That man—" She stopped, shook her head. "What was that?" "That," Dora said, "was a warning." She watched the dust settle where the trucks had been, her mind already running through everything Hereford had said. The cologne, the smile, the way his eyes went cold the second she said no. Men like that didn't walk away easy. She knew it, the way she knew weather was coming before the clouds showed up. She was right. The middle truck stopped at the end of the drive instead of turning onto the road. Its door swung open. Dutch Blaine climbed back out, alone this time, and started walking toward the house with long, heavy strides. "Melody, get inside," Dora said quietly. Melody didn't move fast enough. Dutch crossed the yard in seconds, faster than a man his size should move. He grabbed Melody by the arm before she could step back, yanking her toward him hard enough to make her cry out. "Maybe she needs the message more than you do," he said, grinning at Dora over Melody's shoulder. "Boss said be nice. Didn't say I had to be." Dora's whole body went still. Anyone watching might have thought she'd frozen, scared stiff by the sight of a man twice her size manhandling her friend. They would have been wrong. What looked like stillness was something else entirely. A switch flipping somewhere deep inside her. The same switch that used to flip in places with names she still wasn't allowed to say out loud. She moved. It happened too fast for Dutch to understand, until it was already over. Dora closed the distance between them in 2 steps, grabbed his wrist, and twisted. Something popped, a sound like a green branch snapping. And Dutch howled, releasing Melody instantly. Before he could even register the pain, Dora had pulled the pistol from his waistband, spun it in her grip, and pointed it square at his chest. 4 seconds, maybe 5. "Don't move," Dora said, voice flat and cold as winter ground. Melody stumbled back against the porch rail, eyes wide, staring at Dora like she'd never seen her before. The other 2 men were already scrambling out of the trucks, but they froze halfway across the yard when they saw their friend on his knees, cradling a wrist that bent the wrong way, staring down the barrel of his own gun. Hereford climbed out last, his face twisted somewhere between fury and disbelief. "What the hell?" he started. "Your boy put his hands on someone who didn't deserve it," Dora said, never taking her eyes off Dutch. "Lucky for him, I only broke his wrist." "You don't know who you're messing with," Hereford snapped, though his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. Dora almost laughed. Almost. "No," she said. "You don't know who you're messing with." She let the words sit there a moment, heavy and sharp. 20 years in the Army. Most of it doing things I'm not allowed to talk about, in places that don't show up on your maps. Delta Force, if that name means anything to you. Her eyes flicked to Hereford, hard and unblinking. "So next time you send a man to grab a woman half his size, you better hope she's not me." Nobody said anything for a long moment. Dutch groaned on the ground, clutching his wrist to his chest. "Get him up," Dora said finally, "and get off my land." Now! The third enforcer rushed forward, hauling Dutch to his feet. Hereford stared at Dora a beat longer, something calculating behind his eyes now instead of confidence. Then he turned without another word, climbing back into his truck. His men followed, Dutch cursing under his breath the whole way. The trucks peeled out fast this time, gravel spraying behind them as they sped off the property. Dora finally let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her hands, still steady, lowered the gun. Melody was staring at her, pale and shaken. "Dora, what was that?" "That," Dora said quietly, "was me protecting what's mine." She walked over, helping Melody up off the rail, checking her arm where Dutch's grip had left red marks already starting to bruise. "Come on," Dora said. "Let's get you inside. We need to call the sheriff." The sheriff's cruiser pulled up just after 1 in the afternoon, kicking up the same dust the Iron Wolves trucks had left behind that morning. Dora watched from the porch as Sheriff Wendell Tarkington climbed out, hitching up his belt before he walked toward her. He was an older man, gray at the temples, with the kind of slow, easy walk that made him look like nothing ever rattled him. "Heard you had some trouble out here," he said, stopping at the bottom of the porch steps. "You could say that." Dora crossed her arms. "Man named Ridge Hereford came onto my property this morning. Tried to strong-arm me into selling my water rights. When I said no, one of his men grabbed Melody." Tarkington's eyebrows lifted. He pulled a small notepad from his shirt pocket. "Grabbed her how?" "By the arm. Hard enough to leave a mark." Dora kept her voice steady, even though the memory of it still burned hot in her chest. "I stopped him before it went any further." "Stopped him how?" "Broke his wrist." Tarkington's pen paused over the notepad. He looked up at her, studying her face like he was trying to decide if she was joking. She wasn't. "You broke his wrist." "He had his hands on my friend," Dora said simply. "I wasn't about to ask him nicely to let go." Inside the house, Melody sat at the kitchen table, her arm wrapped in a cold compress, watching through the screen door. She hadn't said much since it happened. Dora figured the shock hadn't fully worn off yet. Tarkington scribbled something in his notepad, nodding along as Dora gave him the rest of it. The offer, the threats, the trucks, all of it. He didn't interrupt much. When she finished, he tucked the notepad back into his pocket and gave her a firm nod. "I'll head out. Talk to this Hereford fella myself," he said. "Men like that, they usually back off once they know the law's watching." "You sure about that?" "Mrs. Whitelaw, I've been sheriff in this county 19 years. I know how to handle troublemakers." He tipped his hat slightly. "You did the right thing protecting your property. I'll make sure he understands that loud and clear." Dora wanted to believe him. Some small, tired part of her did. She thanked him, watched him drive off, and told herself maybe it really was over. By evening, it almost felt that way. A local news van showed up around 6, a young reporter asking Dora a handful of questions about the altercation on her ranch. The segment ran that night, a short clip calling Dora a fearless rancher who stood her ground against intimidation. Neighbors Dora barely knew called to check in, some of them laughing, saying they always knew there was more to her than she let on. Melody managed a small smile watching it on the kitchen TV, her arm still sore but her color back to normal. "Guess you're famous now," she said. "Guess so," Dora said, though she didn't feel much like celebrating. Something in her gut wouldn't settle. She'd spent enough years reading men like Hereford to know his kind didn't fold that easy. Men who smiled while they threatened you didn't disappear just because a sheriff knocked on their door and asked them politely to stop. After Melody went to bed, Dora walked the property alone, the way she always did when something felt unfinished. She checked the barn locks twice, walked the fence line near the road, flashlight cutting through the dark. The horses shifted restlessly in the pasture, sensing something she couldn't quite name herself. The night was quiet. Too quiet, maybe. But nothing moved. No trucks. No shadows where they shouldn't be. Still, when she finally came back inside, she didn't sleep easy. She stood at the front door a long moment before locking it, staring out at the dark fields stretching toward the road. Somewhere out there, Hereford was probably sitting in some office, nursing his pride and figuring his next move. Dora turned off the porch light, but she left one lamp burning in the kitchen, just in case. Dora was up before sunrise, same as always, pouring feed for the horses when she heard a car coming up the drive. Not trucks this time. Just one car, quiet and slow, like whoever was driving didn't want to announce themselves. She set the feed bucket down and watched a small gray sedan roll to a stop near the barn. Deputy Rachel Costello stepped out, dressed in plain clothes instead of her uniform, glancing back toward the road like she was checking if anyone had followed her. "Deputy," Dora said, wiping her hands on her jeans. "Didn't expect you out here. Especially not like this." "I'm off duty," Costello said quickly. "This isn't official. I need you to understand that before I say anything else." Dora's stomach tightened. She'd learned a long time ago that conversations starting that way never ended well. "Okay, I'm listening." Costello glanced toward the house, then back at Dora, lowering her voice even though there was no one around to hear them. "Sheriff Tarkington didn't go talk to Hereford yesterday. Not really. I checked the patrol log. He logged 2 hours off-grid, no report filed, no contact noted. Maybe he just forgot the paperwork." "He didn't forget." Costello shook her head, frustration creeping into her voice. "Dora, I've seen things over the past year. Cash deposits that don't match his salary. Calls he takes outside, away from the rest of us. Cases involving Hereford's company that just disappear. No charges, no follow-up. Like someone's making sure they go away quiet." Dora felt something cold settle in her chest. "You're saying the sheriff's on his payroll?" "I'm saying I think so. I can't prove it yet." Costello crossed her arms, looking older than her years in that moment. "But I've been digging on my own time. Hereford's company isn't just buying up land for himself. There's a pipeline expansion coming through this whole region. Big money behind it. Your ranch sits right in the middle of the route they need." Dora's mind raced, pulling the pieces together fast. The offer, the threats, the accidents Hereford had warned her about. None of it had been random. It had been calculated from the start. "So yesterday wasn't him losing his temper," Dora said slowly. "It was business." "Exactly. And men running pipeline money don't usually take no for an answer just because some local sheriff promises to talk things over." Costello's eyes were sharp, serious. "I've seen what happened to 2 other ranches near the county line. Forced sales, bad paperwork, owners who suddenly couldn't afford to fight anymore. I think it's the same syndicate." Dora exhaled slowly, the morning suddenly feeling colder than it had a minute ago. "Why are you telling me this? You could lose your job." "Because what happened to you yesterday isn't going to be the last time," Costello said. "And because somebody in this department needs to actually do their job for once." She hesitated, glancing toward the road again. "Please don't repeat where this came from. If Tarkington finds out I came here, it could get bad for both of us." "You have my word." Costello nodded, some of the tension easing from her shoulders. "Just be careful. Document everything. Cameras, papers, anything they send you. If this really is bigger than Hereford acting alone, you're going to need proof, eventually. Real proof. Not just a news story painting you as brave for one day." She climbed back into her car without waiting for a response, pulling out of the drive the same quiet way she'd come in. Dora stood there a long moment after the dust settled, replaying everything Costello had said. Yesterday's victory, the one that had felt so solid on the evening news, suddenly looked paper-thin. A sheriff who wasn't really on her side. A syndicate with money and lawyers behind it, instead of just angry men in trucks. This wasn't over. It was only getting started. She walked back inside, mind already working through what needed to happen next. Cameras on the gates. Copies of everything. A folder, maybe, kept somewhere safe. In the kitchen, she poured coffee with hands that weren't quite steady, staring out the window at the quiet fields beyond. Her phone sat on the counter, screen dark. It rang before she even sat down. Unknown number. Dora stared at it a moment, something heavy settling low in her stomach, before she finally picked it up. Dora pressed the phone to her ear. "Hello? Mrs. Whitelaw." The voice was smooth, almost cheerful, but Dora recognized it instantly. Hereford. "Hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." Her grip tightened on the counter. "You've got some nerve calling me after what your man pulled yesterday." "Funny. That's exactly what I wanted to talk about." His tone stayed light, but there was something sharper underneath it now, like a blade hidden in silk. "See? My lawyer's been doing some digging. Turns out you've got quite the file, Mrs. Whitelaw. Delta Force, classified missions, lots of training in how to hurt people fast and quiet. You should have thought about that before your man put his hands on my friend." "Oh, I'm sure that's how you remember it?" Hereford's voice took on a mocking edge. "Way I remember it, my associate approached your ranch peacefully, and you assaulted him without provocation, broke his wrist, pointed a loaded firearm at 3 unarmed men. Funny how memory works." Dora's stomach dropped. "That's not what happened, and you know it. Doesn't matter what I know." Hereford's voice hardened, all the friendliness gone now. "Matter is what I can prove. And trust me, sweetheart, I've got people a lot better at proving things than you do. Witnesses, statements, a very convincing story about a dangerous, unstable veteran who attacked innocent businessmen on her property. You're going to lie. I'm going to win." His words landed flat and certain, like a man who'd done this before and knew exactly how it ended. "I'm filing an assault complaint against you today. By the time my lawyers finish, you won't just lose the land, Mrs. Whitelaw. You'll lose everything. Your reputation. Maybe your freedom, if we push it far enough." Dora's hand shook, fury and disbelief colliding in her chest. "You think a courtroom scares me? I've faced worse than you in places that don't even have laws." "Sure you have," Hereford laughed, low and humorless. "But out here, in my county, with my sheriff and my lawyers, this isn't a place you can shoot your way out of. This is a place where paperwork wins. And I've got a whole lot more paperwork than you do." "You're a coward," Dora snapped, "hiding behind judges and lawyers because you know you can't win any other way. Call me whatever you want. Won't change what's coming." His voice dropped, almost gentle now, which somehow made it worse. 72 hours, Mrs. Whitelaw. That's about how long it usually takes a judge around here to sign an eviction order once the right paperwork lands on his desk. Might want to start packing. The line went dead before she could respond. Dora stood frozen in her kitchen, phone still pressed against her ear, the dial tone humming in the silence. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but from something closer to rage. Years of training had taught her how to handle threats she could see, men she could fight with her hands. This was different. This was a war fought with paper and lies, and she didn't yet know how to win it. "Dora?" Melody's voice came from the doorway, worry written across her face. "Who was that?" Dora set the phone down slowly. "Hereford." "What did he want?" "He's filing assault charges against me." Dora's voice stayed flat, controlled, even as everything inside her churned. "Says he's got witnesses. Says he's going to prove I attacked his men, unprovoked. Says he's got the sheriff and the courts in his pocket. And there's nothing I can do about it. Melody's face went pale. Can he actually do that? He thinks he can. Dora pulled out a chair at the kitchen table and sat down heavily, the weight of everything finally settling onto her shoulders. This isn't just about the land anymore. He's coming after my freedom, my name, everything I've got left. Melody sat down across from her, quiet for a long moment. What do we do? Dora stared at the table, thinking of Costello's warning from that morning. The cash deposits, the missing reports, the syndicate behind it all. This wasn't going to be solved with a broken wrist or a loaded gun. This was going to take proof, real proof, the kind that could stand up in front of a judge who wasn't already bought and paid for. We fight, Dora said finally. But we fight smart this time. That evening, a courier arrived at the gate, dropping off a thick manila envelope without a word before driving away. Dora opened it slowly at the kitchen table, Melody watching over her shoulder. Inside sat a copy of Hereford's formal complaint, her name printed clean and official across the top, the lie already taking shape in black and white. 3 days passed after the courier left that envelope on Dora's porch. 3 days of waiting, of checking the mailbox with her stomach in knots, of trying to keep the ranch running like nothing had changed, even though everything had. On the 4th morning, Melody burst into the kitchen holding her phone, her face white. Dora, you need to see this. She set the phone on the table and pressed play. A video filled the screen, grainy footage from what looked like a security camera angle near the barn. Dora watched herself disarm Dutch Blaine, watched the wrist snap, watched her point the gun at his chest. But something was wrong. The footage started a half-second too late, cutting out the moment Dutch grabbed Melody entirely. To anyone watching, it looked like Dora had attacked an unarmed man standing peacefully on her property. That's not what happened, Dora said, voice tight. I know that. You know that. Melody shook her head. But that's not what people are seeing. The video had already been picked up by a local news station, then shared online hundreds of times by evening. Comments piled up underneath it, strangers calling Dora dangerous, unstable, a threat to decent business owners just trying to make an honest offer. The same reporter who'd called her a fearless rancher 4 days earlier now ran a follow-up story, asking if Dora Whitelaw's military background made her a danger to her own community. By the end of the week, one of Dora's longtime ranch hands, an older man named Pete, who'd worked the property since her husband was alive, quit without much explanation, mumbling something about not wanting trouble. 2 neighbors who used to wave at her on the road now looked away when she drove past. Dora called the sheriff's office, demanding to know why her own security footage, the real footage that would clear her completely, hadn't been pulled and reviewed. Sheriff Tarkington took the call himself this time. Funny thing, he said, his voice carrying none of the warmth from their first conversation. We went out to your property to collect that footage, and it seems your system malfunctioned right around the time of the incident. No backup files. Real shame. That's a lie, Dora said flatly. I don't appreciate the accusation, Mrs. Whitelaw. His tone hardened. Maybe you should be more careful about how that system gets maintained. The line went dead. Dora sat at her kitchen table a long time after that call, staring at nothing, piecing together what she already half knew. Tarkington wasn't just slow-walking her case. He was actively burying it. Costello had warned her, and now she was watching it happen in real time, helpless to stop it through any normal channel. That night, after Melody went to bed, Dora pulled an old laptop from a closet and began writing everything down herself. Dates. Times. Exact words Hereford had used on the phone. The names of every man who'd stepped onto her property that first morning. She printed copies of every message, Every voicemail transcript, every photo she'd taken of the cut fence and sick cattle, the syndicate hadn't even gotten around to denying yet. She bought a small, fireproof lockbox the next afternoon, the kind meant for important documents, and began filling it, page by page. If the system wanted to erase her evidence, she would simply build her own that no one could touch. By the following week, the box held a thick stack of papers, a backup flash drive, even her own handwritten timeline of everything since the morning Hereford's trucks first rolled up her drive. She locked it, slid it into the bottom drawer of her husband's old desk, and sat back, feeling for the first time in days like she had some small measure of control again. She was just closing the drawer when she heard a car coming up the gravel drive, slower and quieter than Hereford's trucks had ever been. Dora stood, glancing out the window toward the fading evening light. An unfamiliar car, one she didn't recognize at all. Dora stepped onto the porch as the car rolled to a stop, gravel crunching under its tires. The driver's door opened, and a young man climbed out, tall and thin, a worn duffel bag slung over one shoulder. Dora's breath caught. "Owen?" Owen Castellan stood there a moment, hands shoved in his jacket pockets, looking at the house like he wasn't quite sure he belonged there anymore. He had his father's jaw, sharp and stubborn, and a tired look around his eyes that hadn't been there the last time she'd seen him. "Hey, Aunt Dora," he said finally. 2 years. That's how long it had been since they'd spoken more than a handful of clipped words at a holiday neither of them really wanted to attend. After his parents' divorce, Owen had lived with Dora and her husband through most of his early teens, a difficult stretch when nothing about his life felt steady. Dora had tried her best, but deployments pulled her away for months at a time, and Owen had never forgiven her for the empty chair at his birthdays, the missed school events, the years he'd needed her, and she'd been somewhere she couldn't even talk about. "What are you doing here?" Dora asked, not unkindly, just surprised. "Working a story." Owen shifted his bag higher on his shoulder. "Land fraud. A pipeline company buying up rural properties through some pretty ugly tactics. I've been chasing it for months." He paused, studying her face. "Then I saw your name in a news clip. Some viral video. Aunt Dora attacks local businessman, or whatever garbage headline they ran." Dora's jaw tightened. "It's not what it looks like." "I figured." Owen's voice softened slightly. "I've seen enough of these stories to know how the footage gets cut. Whoever's behind your case, I think they're the same people behind everything I've been investigating." Dora studied him a long moment, old hurt and new urgency tangled together in her chest. Part of her wanted to ask why now, after 2 years of silence, after birthdays and phone calls that went unanswered. But there wasn't time for that conversation tonight, not with everything closing in around her. "Come inside," she said instead. "I think we need to talk." They sat at the kitchen table while Dora laid out everything: Hereford's offer, the attack on Melody, the assault charges, the missing security footage, Costello's warning about Tarkington, and the syndicate behind it all. Owen listened without interrupting, jaw tightening more with every detail. When she finished, he pulled a battered laptop from his bag and set it on the table between them. "I've been tracking a company called Meridian Land Partners for almost 6 months," he said, opening file after file. "They're buying distressed rural properties dirt cheap, right along a route a major interstate pipeline expansion is supposed to follow. 3 ranches I know of have already gone under. Forced sales, bad paperwork, families who couldn't afford to fight back legally." "Hereford's company," Dora said quietly. "Has to be a front for them. Has to be." Owen's eyes lit with the kind of focus Dora remembered from when he was younger, stubborn and sharp, even as a kid. "If I can connect Hereford directly to Meridian, and connect Meridian to whatever's happening with your sheriff, this isn't just your fight anymore. This is a real story. The kind that gets people locked up." Dora felt something shift in her chest, something between relief and disbelief. After days of fighting alone, of watching the system bend itself around Hereford's money, here was someone finally standing on her side of the fight. Someone with the skills to dig where she couldn't. "Why help me?" she asked quietly. "After everything." Owen didn't look up right away. "Because you're my family," he said finally. "Whatever else happened between us, you're still my family. And because what they're doing to you, they've done to other people too. People who didn't have someone like you to fight back." Dora reached across the table, resting her hand briefly over his. He didn't pull away. "All right," she said. "Then let's find everything they don't want us to find." Owen nodded, already pulling up another folder of documents, fingers moving fast across the keyboard. Outside, the last light of evening faded over the fields, the kitchen lamp casting a warm glow over the table as the two of them bent over the screen together, old wounds set aside for now, replaced by a shared purpose neither of them had expected. Dora woke before dawn the next morning, same as always, and walked out to the pasture to check the herd. She smelled it before she saw it. Something sour hung in the air near the feed trough, sharp and wrong. 3 of her cattle lay on the ground, sides heaving, foam gathered at their mouths. Dora dropped to her knees beside the nearest one, running her hands over its trembling flank, already knowing in her gut what she'd find before she even checked the feed bin. The grain was tainted, some kind of chemical mixed in, dumped right into the trough sometime in the night. "No," she whispered, fury rising hot and fast in her chest. "No, no, no!" She called the vet immediately, then walked the fence line while she waited, checking for tracks, for any sign of who'd done this. She found it near the north pasture, a section of fence cut clean through with bolt cutters, wire curled back like a wound torn open. 6 horses had wandered loose through the gap sometime before sunrise, scattering toward the county road. By the time Owen stumbled out of the house, still rubbing sleep from his eyes, Dora was already saddling a horse to round up the strays before a car hit one on the highway. "What happened?" he asked, taking in her face. "They poisoned the cattle, cut the fence." Dora's hands moved fast, tightening the saddle straps. "They're done playing games." Melody arrived an hour later to help with the herd, her face pale when she saw the sick cattle still struggling near the trough. The 3 of them worked through the morning, herding horses back through the broken fence, waiting on the vet, documenting everything with photos for whatever good it might do them now. By early afternoon, with the worst of the crisis handled, Melody offered to drive into town for emergency supplies, medicine for the cattle, wire and tools to mend the fence before dark. Dora almost went herself, but Owen needed her help cross-referencing land records, so she let Melody go alone, a decision she would replay in her mind for days afterward. Melody never made it back. Dora's phone rang a little after 3. A stranger's voice, calm and clinical, telling her Melody had been involved in an accident on Route 9, that she was being taken to the hospital in town, that she was conscious but hurt. Dora and Owen reached the hospital 20 minutes later, both of them out of breath as they pushed through the emergency room doors. A doctor met them in the hallway, explaining that Melody had a concussion and a broken arm, the result of an unmarked truck running her off the road and into a ditch. Witnesses said the truck never stopped. Dora found Melody in a hospital bed, her arm already in a temporary splint, a bruise blooming dark along her jaw. Melody managed a weak smile when she saw them. "Should have seen the other guy's truck," she said, voice rough. "Big black thing. Didn't even slow down." Dora took her hand gently, fury and guilt twisting together in her chest. "I shouldn't have let you go alone." "Wasn't your fault," Melody said. "It was theirs." Owen stood near the window, jaw clenched tight, already pulling out his phone. "I've got contacts who've documented this exact pattern before. Unmarked trucks, no plates. always close enough to scare, sometimes close enough to hurt. He scrolled through something, anger sharpening his voice. 3 other ranchers reported almost identical incidents over the past year, all of them tied to properties Meridian Land Partners wanted. Dora stayed beside Melody's bed through the evening, refusing to leave even when the nurses suggested visiting hours were ending. Owen worked quietly in the corner of the room, laptop balanced on his knees, cross-referencing accident reports with land deeds late into the night. Around midnight, with Melody finally asleep, Owen looked up from his screen, exhaustion and determination, both written across his face. "This isn't just intimidation anymore," he said quietly. "This is a pattern, a system. And it's escalating." Dora stared at Melody's sleeping face, the bruise along her jaw, the splint holding her broken arm steady. Something settled cold and certain in her chest, the same kind of clarity she used to feel right before a mission, when fear burned away and only purpose remained. "Then we stop building a defense," Dora said quietly. "We start building a case strong enough to end them." Owen nodded, already turning back to his screen, fingers moving faster now. Melody was released from the hospital the next morning, her arm set in a proper cast, doctor's orders to rest for at least a week. Dora drove her home slow and careful, Owen following behind in his own car, and by early afternoon they'd settled Melody into the guest room with strict instructions to stay off her feet. For 2 days, the ranch fell into a strange, tense quiet. Dora handled the chores alone, checking on Melody between feedings, while Owen barely left the kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of printed documents and 3 different laptops humming late into the night. On the 3rd morning, Dora found him exactly where she'd left him, eyes red-rimmed but bright, with something close to triumph. "I found it," he said before she'd even poured her coffee. He turned his laptop toward her, pulling up a scanned document covered in dense legal language. County deed records. 3 ranches over the past 14 months, all sold under suspicious circumstances. All 3 deeds processed through the same county clerk's office. All 3 approved by the same judge. He clicked to another file. And look at this. A wire transfer record filled the screen, dated 8 months earlier. $20,000, moved from a shell company linked to Meridian Land Partners directly into a personal account belonging to Wendell Tarkington. Dora's coffee mug froze halfway to her mouth. "That's the sheriff's account." Confirmed it against public salary records this morning. There's no legitimate way he should have that kind of money moving through a personal account. Owen's hands were practically shaking with adrenaline. There's more. Forged signatures on 2 of the deeds. Notary stamps that don't match official county records. This isn't sloppy. This is a system, built carefully, by people who thought no one would ever look close enough to notice. Melody shuffled into the kitchen, cast resting against her chest, peering over Owen's shoulder at the screen. "So, what do we do with it?" "We take it straight to the district attorney," Dora said, already moving with purpose. "Today. Before anything else happens to any of us." They drove into town together that afternoon, Owen's laptop bag heavy with printed copies of everything they'd gathered. The district attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Heaston, listened without interruption as Dora and Owen laid out the evidence piece by piece across her desk. The wire transfers, the forged deeds, the pattern of intimidation matching 3 other ranches in the county. "This is serious material," Heaston said finally, flipping through the pages with careful attention. "If even half of this holds up, we're looking at fraud, bribery, possibly racketeering charges against multiple individuals." "What about the assault charges against me?" Dora asked. "Hereford's claiming I attacked his men unprovoked. Given what you've shown me here, I think it's safe to say his credibility is about to take a serious hit." Heaston made a note on her legal pad. "I'm going to have my office formally review everything. Open an investigation into Sheriff Tarkington immediately. Your charges should be reconsidered once we establish the full pattern of misconduct. Relief washed over Dora so suddenly it almost made her dizzy. So this could actually be over. I won't promise timelines, Heaston said, but this is exactly the kind of evidence that breaks cases like this wide open. Leave everything with me. I'll be in touch within the week. They left the office that afternoon, lighter than they'd felt in days, the weight of weeks finally easing from Dora's shoulders. Owen kept glancing at her in the car, a small, disbelieving smile tugging at his mouth. "We actually did it," he said. "We actually found something real." That evening, Dora cooked dinner for the first time in what felt like forever. The three of them gathered around the kitchen table, Melody's cast propped carefully on a pillow, Owen looking more relaxed than Dora had seen him since he arrived. They toasted with glasses of sweet tea, laughing for the first time in weeks at some old story Melody told about a stubborn horse from years back. "To justice," Dora said, raising her glass. "Finally catching up to people who thought they'd never get caught." Owen clinked his glass against hers. "To family, fighting back." Outside, the evening settled quiet and peaceful over the ranch, stars beginning to scatter across the darkening sky. For the first time since Hereford's trucks had first rolled up her drive, Dora let herself believe, just for tonight, that the worst of it might finally be behind them. 3 days passed in a strange, fragile calm. Dora kept busy with chores, Melody's arm healed slow in its cast, and Owen spent most of his time on the phone with his editor, laying groundwork for the story that was about to break everything wide open. The call from the district attorney's office came on the 4th morning. Dora answered with hope still humming in her chest, certain she was about to hear good news. Instead, Patricia Heaston's voice came through tight and careful, the kind of careful that immediately set Dora's nerves on edge. "Mrs. Whitelaw, I need to inform you of a serious problem," Heaston said. "The evidence you and your nephew submitted has gone missing from our secure evidence room. All of it. The wire transfer records, the forged deeds, everything." Dora's stomach dropped straight through the floor. "Missing how? We gave you physical copies and digital files." "The physical copies are gone. The digital files were corrupted somehow. The backups erased." Heaston's voice carried real frustration, but also something like fear. "I don't know how this happened yet, but without that evidence, I have nothing solid enough to move forward with charges against Sheriff Tarkington or open a formal investigation into Meridian Land Partners. And my assault charges?" A pause. "Those remain active, unfortunately. Without the evidence undermining Hereford's credibility, I don't have grounds to drop them." Dora hung up the phone, hands trembling with a fury so cold it almost felt like calm. She found Owen in the kitchen and told him everything, watching his face crumble from disbelief into rage. "That's not possible," he said. "I backed up copies on 3 separate drives." "Doesn't matter," Dora said. "Someone made sure it disappeared anyway." The second blow landed an hour later. A sheriff's deputy Dora didn't recognize arrived at the gate, delivering a thick legal envelope without a word. Inside sat an emergency eviction order, signed by a county judge, citing Dora's active assault charges as grounds for immediate removal from the property. 72 hours. That's all the time she had left before the ranch would no longer legally belong to her. Dora stood on the porch, reading it twice, the words blurring together with disbelief. 72 hours, she said quietly, almost laughing at how perfectly it matched the number Hereford had thrown at her on the phone days earlier. "He told me exactly how this would go." Owen's phone buzzed before she could even process it fully. He answered, listened for a long moment, his face draining of color. "That was my editor," he said when he hung up. "Meridian's lawyers filed a formal ethics complaint against me, claiming I fabricated sources, violated journalistic standards on a previous story. It's bogus, all of it. But my press credentials are suspended pending review. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. They've cut me off completely. I can't publish anything through the paper now, not without credentials backing the story. Dora sat down heavily on the porch steps, the eviction notice still clutched in her hand. 2 days ago, they'd been toasting to justice. Now the evidence had vanished, the charges remained, the eviction loomed, and the one person with the power to expose everything publicly had just been silenced, too. A truck rolled up the drive late that afternoon, slow and deliberate. Dora recognized it immediately. Hereford climbed out alone this time. No enforcers flanking him, just his same cold smile stretched across his face as he walked toward the porch. "Heard about your little evidence problem," he said, voice dripping with satisfaction. "Shame, really? All that hard work. Gone just like that." "You did this," Dora said flatly. "I told you how this works, Mrs. Whitelaw." He stopped at the bottom of the steps, looking up at her with open contempt. "Men like me don't lose. We've got judges in our pocket, evidence rooms with doors that open easy when the right people knock. You really thought a few printed papers were going to stop something this big?" Dora said nothing, her jaw tight, fury and helplessness colliding somewhere deep in her chest. 72 hours, Hereford said, glancing at the eviction notice still in her hand. "Pack light." He turned and walked back to his truck without waiting for a response, leaving Dora standing frozen on the porch steps, the paper trembling slightly in her grip. Owen stepped up beside her, staring after Hereford's truck as it disappeared down the drive. Neither of them said anything for a long moment, the weight of everything pressing down heavy and silent. The sun began sinking behind the fields, the 72-hour deadline already circled in red ink on the notice in Dora's hand, counting down toward something neither of them yet knew how to stop. The kitchen lamp burned low that night, throwing long shadows across the table where the eviction notice still sat, its red-circled deadline staring up at all three of them. Melody sat with her cast propped on a pillow, quiet and pale. Owen hadn't said much since Hereford's truck disappeared down the drive, his suspended credentials sitting like a dead weight beside his laptop. Dora stared at the notice a long time before she finally stood up and walked to the old desk in the corner of the living room, the one that still smelled faintly of her husband's cedar aftershave even 3 years later. She pulled open the bottom drawer and dug past old letters and photographs until her fingers found a small leather address book, the kind nobody used anymore. She flipped to a page near the back, found a number she hadn't dialed in over a year, and carried the phone out onto the porch, where she could think clearly. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered, sharp and alert, even at this hour. "Mulgrave. Colonel, it's Dora Whitelaw." A pause, surprise softening into warmth. "Whitelaw. It's been a long time. Everything all right?" "No, ma'am." "It's not." Dora's voice stayed steady, the way it always had under pressure, even as everything in her chest felt close to breaking. "I need your help." She laid it all out, start to finish. Hereford, the Iron Wolves, the assault charges built on lies, Tarkington's corruption, the missing evidence, the eviction order with 72 hours on the clock, Owen's suspended credentials, Melody's broken arm. Colonel Beatrice Mulgrave listened without interrupting once, the same way she always had during briefings years ago, absorbing every detail before responding. When Dora finished, there was a long silence on the line. "Dora," Mulgrave said finally, "I need you to understand something. I'm not just retired anymore. I'm liaison now to a federal task force, investigating rural land fraud and corruption tied to pipeline expansion projects. 3 states, dozens of properties." Her voice sharpened with sudden urgency. "We've had Meridian Land Partners on our radar for months. We just haven't had a single case solid enough, with witnesses willing to talk, to move on them yet. Dora's breath caught. You're saying this isn't just about me. I'm saying you might be sitting on exactly what we've been missing. Mulgrave's voice carried the same calm authority Dora remembered from a dozen briefing rooms years ago. Everything you just described matches patterns we've documented elsewhere. If even half of what you're telling me holds up, this connects directly to our investigation. They've got 72 hours to throw me off my own land, Colonel. I don't have time to wait on paperwork. You won't have to. Mulgrave's tone left no room for doubt. I can have federal marshals at your property before that deadline expires. Give me coordinates and contact information for everyone involved. Local sheriff, this Hereford character, your nephew, the deputy you mentioned. Dora rattled it all off quickly, hope rising, cautious and fragile in her chest for the first time since the evidence had vanished. Sit tight, Mulgrave said. Don't do anything reckless. Don't let them push you off that land early, and don't engage Hereford directly, if you can avoid it. Help is coming, Whitelaw. I promise you that. The line went dead. Dora stood on the porch a long moment, phone still pressed to her ear, the night quiet around her except for the distant sound of crickets and the horses shifting in the pasture. She walked back inside, where Owen and Melody both looked up immediately, reading something different in her face. Well, Owen asked. My old commanding officer, Dora said. She's working a federal task force investigating exactly what's happening here. Meridian, the pipeline money, all of it. She says my case might be the missing piece they've needed. Dora sat down heavily at the table, exhaustion and relief tangled together. She's sending federal marshals before the deadline hits. Melody let out a long breath. So this could actually be over. For real this time. It could be, Dora said carefully, but we're not out of this yet. We hold the line here until they arrive, no matter what Hereford tries between now and then. Owen nodded slowly, some of the fight returning to his eyes. Then we get ready. Dora glanced at the clock on the wall, then at Melody's cast, then at the eviction notice still sitting on the table. Its deadline ticking closer with every passing hour. Get some sleep, both of you, she said finally, checking the lock on the front door out of old habit. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. We need to be ready for whatever comes through that gate next. Dora was already up checking the fence line when the unmarked sedan pulled through the gate just after 8 the next morning. 2 more vehicles followed close behind, plain and dark, the kind designed to not draw attention. Colonel Beatrice Mulgrave climbed out of the first one, dressed in a simple gray jacket, her silver hair pulled back tight, the same sharp authority in her bearing that Dora remembered from years of briefings under far more dangerous skies. Whitelaw, Mulgrave said, extending a firm hand. Wish we were meeting somewhere better. So do I, Colonel. Dora shook her hand, relief and gratitude tightening her throat. Thank you for coming so fast. 2 federal marshals climbed out behind her, younger, watchful, already scanning the property with trained eyes. Mulgrave wasted no time, following Dora inside where Owen and Melody waited at the kitchen table. The same documents Owen had gathered days earlier spread out again, this time photographed and saved across multiple new locations. Mulgrave reviewed everything methodically, flipping through printed pages, asking sharp, precise questions about dates and names. This matches patterns we've already documented in 2 neighboring states, she said finally, tapping the wire transfer records. Forced sales, manipulated deeds, intimidation escalating into violence when families wouldn't sell quietly. You've essentially handed us the missing piece connecting Meridian's operations directly to local law enforcement corruption. The evidence we gave the DA disappeared, Dora reminded her. What's stopping that from happening again? This time, it's not sitting in a county evidence room someone local can access. Mulgrave's tone left no room for doubt. Everything goes straight into federal custody, today, under my authority. Owen leaned forward, something sparking back to life behind his tired eyes. There's something else. Before my credentials got suspended, I sent my full research file to my editor, dated and time-stamped. Original documents, photos, everything. It's already sitting in their system, completely outside Meridian's reach. Mulgrave's expression sharpened with interest. That's good. That's very good. A clean, independently verified copy strengthens everything considerably. A car door slammed outside. Dora glanced through the window to see Deputy Rachel Costello climbing out of her own vehicle, off duty again, glancing nervously toward the federal sedans before walking up to the porch. "I saw the unmarked cars," Costello said when Dora opened the door. I figured something was finally happening. Dora introduced her to Mulgrave, watching Costello's posture straighten the moment she understood who she was speaking with. "I've been building my own case against Sheriff Tarkington for months," Costello admitted, pulling a small flash drive from her jacket pocket. "Payroll discrepancies, missing reports, calls he's taken off the books. I didn't have anywhere safe to take it. Internal affairs in this county isn't exactly independent." Mulgrave took the drive without hesitation. "You do now." For the next several hours, the group worked together at Dora's kitchen table, piecing together the full shape of the conspiracy. Hereford's company, Tarkington's corruption, Meridian's pipeline money, the pattern of violence against ranchers across 3 counties. Mulgrave coordinated quietly with her task force by phone, confirming that federal agents could move on Hereford directly once he attempted to enforce the eviction order himself. "He's confident," Mulgrave said, ending one call. "Arrogant men usually want to be there personally when they think they've won. My guess is he shows up tomorrow morning, deadline day, expecting to watch you walk off this land. And instead, he walks into all of you," Owen said. "Exactly." Mulgrave looked around the table at each of them. "We need everyone in position before sunrise. Marshals stationed nearby, out of sight. Deputy Costello ready to formally detain Tarkington the moment we move. Owen, your documentation goes out publicly the second this breaks, so there's no chance of anything getting buried again." Dora felt something steady settle in her chest, the same calm clarity she used to feel before a mission, when the plan finally clicked into place after days of chaos. "And me. You stay visible," Mulgrave said. "Hereford needs to see you standing on this porch tomorrow, certain he's already won, right up until the moment he isn't." As evening settled over the ranch, the marshals moved their vehicles into a quiet position behind the tree line bordering the north pasture, hidden but close. Costello left to prepare her own paperwork against Tarkington, promising to return before dawn. Owen sat up late finalizing his story draft, ready to publish the instant Mulgrave gave the signal. Dora stood on the porch as the sun dropped low behind the fields, the eviction deadline now less than a day away. Tomorrow, everything would finally come to a head, one way or another. She turned and walked back inside, checking the locks out of old habit, though for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel quite so alone facing whatever was coming next. Dora woke before the alarm, the way she always did when something important was coming. The house was still dark, but she could feel the day pressing in already, heavy and certain. 72 hours, down to its final morning. She dressed slow and deliberate, jeans and a plain shirt. Nothing that looked like armor, even though that's exactly what it was. Melody was already in the kitchen when she came down, cast resting on the table, coffee poured for both of them. Owen sat across from her, laptop open. The story ready to publish the second Mulgrave gave the word. "Marshals are in position," Owen said quietly. "Costello just texted. She's close, waiting for the signal." Dora nodded, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. steadying herself the way she used to before missions that mattered. Then we wait for him to show up and think he's already won. She didn't have to wait long. Just after 8, 3 trucks rolled up the drive, the same ones from that first morning weeks ago. Hereford climbed out first, dressed sharp, a folder tucked under his arm like a man arriving to collect something that already belonged to him. Dutch Blaine followed, his wrist still wrapped in a brace, hatred sitting plain across his face. 4 more men climbed out behind them, more than Dora had seen before. Dora stepped out onto the porch alone, unarmed this time, calm as still water. "Mrs. Whitelaw." Hereford's smile stretched wide, satisfied. "Deadline's up. Hope you packed." "I'm not going anywhere," Dora said. "That's cute." Hereford laughed, glancing back at his men. "She still thinks this is a negotiation." "It was never a negotiation," Dora said. "It was always a robbery. You just dressed it up in paperwork." Hereford's smile thinned. "Careful. I've got a legal eviction order and 4 men ready to enforce it. You really want to make this difficult again?" "I want you to understand something," Dora said, stepping forward, her voice steady and cold. "You came onto my land thinking I was just some widow. You could scare off with paperwork and threats. You poisoned my cattle. You ran my friend off the road and broke her arm. You stole evidence and bought a sheriff and a judge. And you still don't understand what kind of mistake you made." "The mistake was yours," Hereford snapped, stepping closer, his patience finally cracking. "You should have taken the money the first day. Instead, you made this personal. And now you're going to lose everything anyway. Land. Reputation. Maybe your freedom, once Dutch finishes his statement against you." Dutch smirked, flexing his braced wrist like a trophy. Hereford motioned to his men. "Get the trucks loaded. Start with the barn." The men started moving across the yard, exactly as planned, exactly as Dora needed them to. She kept her eyes locked on Hereford, stalling, drawing his attention while his men spread further from their vehicles. "You're making a mistake," Dora said. "No," Hereford said, smug satisfaction settling back over his face. "I already made the right one, weeks ago, the day I decided you weren't worth being careful with." That's when the sound came. Engines, multiple, approaching fast from 2 directions at once. Hereford's head snapped toward the tree line as Mulgrave's federal vehicles broke from cover, followed immediately by Deputy Costello's patrol car, tearing up the main drive, lights flashing. "What the hell?" Hereford started. His men froze mid-stride, confusion rippling through them as the vehicles converged on the property from every angle. Dutch's smirk vanished, his good hand instinctively reaching toward his waistband before one of the marshal's raised weapons stopped him cold. Hereford spun back toward Dora, fury and disbelief twisting his face. "What did you do?" "I made a phone call," Dora said quietly. "Turns out you're not the only one with friends in powerful places." Mulgrave's vehicle skidded to a stop in the yard, the colonel stepping out fast, federal credentials already raised high enough for everyone to see. Marshals fanned out across the property, weapons drawn but controlled, surrounding Hereford's men before a single one of them could even think about running. "Ridge Hereford!" Mulgrave called out, voice cutting sharp across the yard. "Federal task force! You're going to want to keep your hands where we can see them." Hereford stood frozen in the middle of his own collapsing plan, mouth opening and closing without sound, his folder of paperwork hanging useless at his side. Dora stayed exactly where she was on the porch, watching the moment unfold, calm and certain for the first time in weeks. 72 hours, she said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. Guess the clock ran out on you instead. The yard turned to controlled chaos in seconds. Marshals moved fast and sure, pulling Hereford's men away from the trucks one by one, cuffing them against the hoods, while Dutch Blaine shouted something about lawyers that nobody bothered answering. Mulgrave walked straight up to Hereford, who hadn't moved an inch since the vehicles surrounded him, his folder of eviction paperwork still tucked uselessly under his arm. "Ridge Hereford, you're under federal arrest," Mulgrave said, her voice flat and final. "Conspiracy to commit fraud, bribery of a public official, extortion, and a list of other charges my office is going to enjoy reading you on the drive into the city." "This is insane," Hereford said, finally finding his voice, though it cracked at the edges now, all his earlier confidence draining out of him. "I have legal documents, a court-ordered eviction. You can't just—" "Court orders built on bribery don't mean much in federal court," Mulgrave cut in, nodding to a marshal who stepped forward and pulled Hereford's hands behind his back. Tires crunched across gravel as a second patrol car came up the drive. Deputy Rachel Costello climbed out, moving fast toward the group, her own paperwork clutched tight in one hand. She walked straight past Hereford without a glance and stopped in front of Dutch Blaine instead. "Sheriff Tarkington is already in custody," she announced loudly, making sure everyone heard it. "Picked him up 20 minutes ago at the station, based on financial records I've been compiling for the past 4 months. He's already talking, by the way. Seems eager to make a deal." Dutch's face went pale. "He's lying." "Am I?" Costello pulled out her phone, showing a brief recorded clip of Tarkington's voice, shaky and panicked, already naming names to avoid the harshest charges. Dutch's jaw tightened, calculation flickering behind his eyes. "I want a lawyer," Dutch said quickly, "and I want to talk. Hereford planned all of it. The poisoned cattle, running the woman off the road. All of it was his idea." "Coward," Hereford snapped, but the fight had already left his voice, replaced by something closer to panic now that his own people were turning on him. Dora stepped down off the porch slowly, walking across the yard until she stood directly in front of Hereford, close enough that he had to look her in the eye. "You told me men like you don't lose," she said quietly. "You told me paperwork always wins out here." Hereford said nothing, jaw clenched tight, refusing to meet her gaze now. "You should have believed me the first morning," Dora continued, voice steady and cold. "I told you I'd seen worse than you in places you'll never understand. I meant it." A marshal finally moved Hereford toward one of the federal vehicles, guiding him by the arm. He glanced back once, something bitter and defeated in his expression, before disappearing into the back seat. Owen stood near the porch the entire time, phone raised, recording everything. The arrests, Costello's statement, Mulgrave's federal credentials catching morning light. His thumb moved fast across the screen the moment the last vehicle door closed, uploading the footage straight to his editor, alongside the story he'd kept ready, and waiting for exactly this moment. "It's done," he said, lowering the phone, disbelief and relief washing over his face at once. "It's actually done." Melody limped out from the porch where she'd been watching the whole thing unfold, her cast pressed protectively against her chest, tears standing bright in her eyes. "We won," she said softly, like she still couldn't quite believe the words. "We actually won." Mulgrave approached Dora as the last of the federal vehicles prepared to pull away, Hereford and his men secured inside. "This is just the beginning of the legal process," she said. "But with Blaine talking, Tarkington cooperating, and Owen's documentation already public, I don't see any version of this where Hereford walks away from what he's done." "Thank you, Colonel," Dora said, exhaustion and gratitude tangled together in her chest. "I don't know how I'd have stopped this without you." "You stopped plenty on your own before I ever got here," Mulgrave said, a rare softness crossing her face. "I just brought the paperwork that finally mattered." She climbed into her vehicle and pulled away, the convoy rolling slowly down the drive, dust rising behind them one final time. Dora stood in the quiet yard beside Owen and Melody, watching the trucks disappear toward the road. The same road Hereford's men had first driven up weeks earlier, certain they'd find an easy target. They hadn't. 3 weeks passed before the dust truly settled. Ridge Hereford sat in federal custody awaiting trial on charges of fraud, bribery, extortion, and conspiracy. His bail denied after prosecutors argued he posed a clear flight risk given his ties to Meridian Land Partners' offshore accounts. Dutch Blaine's cooperation earned him a reduced sentence, but not nearly enough to avoid years behind bars. Sheriff Wendell Tarkington resigned in disgrace before the county could formally remove him, his corruption charges making front-page news across the state. The eviction order against Dora's ranch was voided within days. The judge who'd signed it under Hereford's influence quietly removed from the bench pending his own investigation. The county issued a formal public apology to Dora, printed and read aloud at a town meeting Dora didn't bother attending. She didn't need their words. She had her land back, solid and certain beneath her feet, and that was enough. The district attorney's office reopened the cases of the 3 other ranching families Meridian had pushed off their land through forged deeds and manufactured debt. 2 families chose to fight for their properties back. The third, an elderly couple who'd already relocated out of state, accepted a settlement large enough to finally retire in peace. Dora made a point of calling each of them personally, telling them what little she could about how the case had broken open, making sure they knew none of it would have happened without their willingness to come forward once Owen's story gave them the courage to. Owen's article ran nationally 2 weeks after the arrests. Full credentials reinstated the moment the ethics complaint against him was exposed as fabricated by Meridian's legal team. The story spread fast, picked up by larger outlets, turning Owen from a suspended local reporter into a respected name in investigative journalism almost overnight. Offers came in from bigger papers, bigger cities, opportunities he'd spent years chasing. He turned most of them down. "I think I want to stay a while," he told Dora one evening, the 2 of them sitting on the porch steps as the sun dipped low over the pasture. "Work remotely. Help out around here while things settle." Dora studied him a long moment, surprised and quietly grateful. "You don't have to do that for me." "I'm not doing it for you," Owen said, a small smile tugging at his mouth. "I'm doing it because I missed this." "Missed you? Took almost losing the ranch to remember that." He nudged her shoulder gently. "Figured it's about time I stopped running from family instead of toward it." Dora pulled him into a hug, the kind they hadn't shared in years, something healing quietly between them that no headline or court case could have fixed on its own. Melody's cast came off the following week, her arm stiff but healing well, doctors promising a full recovery within another month. She returned to ranch work slowly, Dora insisting on lighter chores until her strength came back completely, though Melody grumbled the whole time about being treated like glass. "I broke a wrist defending you," Dora teased one afternoon, watching Melody attempt to argue her way back onto a horse too soon. "Least you can do is let me return the favor." Melody laughed, the sound easy and bright, nothing like the fear that had haunted her in the weeks after the accident. "Fine, but only because you're scarier than the horse." Deputy Costello, now promoted within a reorganized department under new leadership, stopped by occasionally, no longer needing to hide her visits or glance nervously toward the road. She and Dora had become something like friends through the ordeal, bonded by the kind of trust that only forms when someone risks everything to do what's right. On a quiet Saturday evening, weeks after the arrests, Dora stood on her porch, watching the sun sink low and gold over Whitelaw Ranch. Melody sat nearby, boots up on the railing, laughing at something on her phone. Owen worked at the kitchen table inside, laptop glowing, already drafting his next story. The land stretched out before her, fences mended, cattle healthy and grazing, horses moving easy across the pasture. It had nearly been stolen from her, piece by piece, through lies and money and men who thought a widow alone would simply fold. She hadn't folded. Dora breathed in the evening air, steady and calm, watching the last light settle warm across the fields her family had protected for 3 generations. Whitelaw land, still hers, always would be. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel, and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.